Good evening and welcome to the 9th episode of Swalif with me, Hamad Al Amari, and I'm in the presence of a champion, a world elite athlete, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with him. He's a very, very funny man, and I've had the pleasure of talking to him before this, and the more I read about him, I couldn't help but be impressed. And we're talking about Paralympic Day and Olympic Day. And I'm, of course, with Tucker Dupree. Tucker, how are you?
I'm so well, and I'm very excited to be here. It is exciting to be talking to you as well. Following you on Instagram, all of that's been fun. But, you know, in the flesh via Zoom is also a good time. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much for following me. And I apologize. It's not as interesting as you might have thought it was.
It is. The hype, it's worth the hype. It's good.
For those of you tuning with us on Facebook, you can ask your questions, and towards the end, we'll leave some time to answer your questions. And of course, we're also live on Instagram, but Instagram doesn't allow us to go all over the whole show. So you can, you know, if you're with us on Instagram and you really want to catch the end, do tune in on Facebook. So just off the first thing we have to say is today is not actually World Olympic Day, and it's not World Paralympic Day. That's on the 23rd of June, which is next week. And from what I understand, you've got a very, very busy schedule.
Yeah, I will be in Florida on Paralympic Day. But this week is Paralympic swimming trials. So in the United States, a lot of my former colleagues are racing right now. So I think this is an important week. They named the United States Paralympic team this week. So a lot of Paralympic fun stuff going on, as well as Olympic fun going on, because it's Olympic swimming trials too in Omaha. But big week this week, and next week I'll be in Florida.
Well, you won two medals in the 2012 Olympics, and then one in the 2016 Paralympic Games.
Yep.
And these are unbelievable achievements, you know, for someone like me who was semi-pro in a sport that was golf, which is nothing like the discipline that you must go through. I'm not going to lie. It is a sport. It's very competitive. It has its own discipline, but it's very different from what you do. I understand the amount of work, amount of dedication, the amount of, you know, discipline that it takes to become someone who is an Olympian. But that's not where your journey started. You didn't, you know, crawl out of the womb into the pool. Is that the case?
No, you're right. So I actually started swimming pretty late. A lot of swimmers that swim professionally have swam since they were the age of, 5 or 6 years old. I didn't start swimming until I was actually in high school, but I did play other sports prior to swimming. So I didn't roll off the couch on a random Tuesday and say like, I'm going to become a swimmer. I actually have an older sister, and she was a swimmer. So that was kind of her sport. I played soccer, but in high school, she drove us to school. So that meant whatever activities she wanted to do, I had to tag along. And I actually just sat in the bleachers every day. And the coach would always come up to me and he's like, you're here every day, you might as well swim. And I couldn't wrap my mind around doing an intense sport and wearing a Speedo. So I think that was a lot of my hesitation. I was like, you have to work hard, basically naked. So I'm going to pass on that. Little did I know that little Speedo was actually going to take me all over the world. But I started swimming at a young age, or a pretty late age. So 14, 15 years old is when I swam my first competitive season. And I was terrible. When I got in, the lifeguard stood up on the lifeguard stand, like making sure I wasn't drowning. But I think that was kind of also a lot of the attraction to the sport of swimming, is that it was tough. It's full body resistance, but little incremental improvements made me a lot better. And I went from the slowest person on the team to finally being put on relays at the end of the season. And so I started swimming on a club team at 17 years old. My senior year, I was the team captain, and I was getting recruited to go swim in college. So fast forward from 14, 3 years later, I was becoming this like swimmer that I had the opportunity to swim at university. And that was also the year that I woke up on October 18th, 2006, rubbing my right eye, looking out my left eye, and I noticed I couldn't see a sticker on my closet door. And that day actually kicked off about 3 months of testing until I was diagnosed with a very rare condition that would take about 75% of my vision over the course of 4 months. So that was something that was pretty intense, but also it changed my life forever and made the opportunity available for me to go and compete in the Paralympics. So that was a lot of kind of the beginning of my story. But also, I mean, I went from your normal sighted person to acquiring a disability at 17 years old. And it really flipped my world upside down because I had my mind set on going to swim university. But little did I know that I was going to basically become 75%, 80% blind my senior year.
And before we talk about your loss of vision and Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy.
Wow, I think you're the first person that's ever gotten that first, like right out of the gate. Just right. That's good.
I mean, I have a cheat sheet. I'm very interested in the pre, when you were younger.
Yeah.
What other sports were they? Moving from one sports that you were saying you played in a sport and it was a team sport. What is the transition like? And is having someone in your family who's doing another sport, was there a rivalry between you and your sister? Or was that just there for you as support? I mean, there are, when you're younger, there's multi-sports disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
There's things that you have to have if you're going to be good at sports, basic foundational things, hand-eye coordination, balance, muscle movement, understanding how to move and condition in your body to go in through to start a journey of kind of elite sports. What was the sports that kind of allowed you, because it's not just at 17 or at 14 you were really bad and you were just and it was like I just got super awesome in 2 years. I'm pretty sure it was 15 years of disciplines that allowed you to get to excel in another sport.
Yeah, I played, so growing up and still today, I had too much energy and my parents put me in sports actually to keep me out of trouble and make sure that when I came home, I wasn't still talking. So whenever I did,
I know the feeling, bro.
They're like, oh wait, he can play soccer and run around for 3 hours. Put him on that sport so he shuts up in the car. No, I played soccer. I played basketball. I ran cross country. I did a lot of different sports. And I think the things that sports just taught me a lot about, like just community, but also time management, overall health and fitness, camaraderie, working with a team. I played a lot of team sports, as well as swimming was probably one of the first sports I did that was very individualized, where I had my own lane, I raced the race, and that was my performance, and that was the outcome that I got. But I think that it's just a big part of my life that just sports opened so many doors for me. And I knew that I needed to do something to keep me just occupied mentally, but also engaging with other people. And I think that, I play music as well. So in high school, when I was 14 and 15 years old, I was in the marching band, which also was another thing that just kind of, my parents wanted me to be very diverse and have an opportunity to try lots of different things and then pick one. Was something that they were very adamant about. My mom is an educator, so she's a teacher. So she was very, very into the fact of saying, hey, you need to pick something, but also it needs to be something that you love. Because when you have a family that does sports, my mom would have to drop me off at practice, whatever the sport may be, they're just as involved. So if I was having a good time, it made my parents have a good time as well. So that was the big thing, is that anything that I did, my mom made sure that, like, if I ever said like, oh, I don't want to do this, she's like, okay, well then we need a new sport, because if you're not enjoying this, like, we're not enjoying it either. So I tried a lot of different things. And I think that swimming kind of chose me because, like I was saying earlier, I had zero aspiration to swim. I was trying to do other sports, and swimming was something that thankfully chose me, because the other sports wouldn't probably have been possible with the vision loss that I have. So playing soccer with 80% vision loss is probably not a great idea. And, you know, anything that involves that hand-eye coordination with a ball is just probably not great with the whole blind situation. It might mess up the moneymaker, and that's never good, you know, so.
That's not good. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Running into goalposts wouldn't help, will it?
Or just passing the ball to the wrong person. It's probably not a good idea.
I think you were just, you know, I don't think your mother, I mean, yeah, wants you to go into all of that. I think you were just, you know, causing a lot of trouble at home, and they were, we need to get this guy something to do very quickly.
Exactly. It's organized babysitting, right? Like, it was literally like, I can drop my son off at the soccer field and we'll pick him up in a couple of hours. So
yeah, no,
it was
that's
a break.
I get it. I completely get it. I mean, for me, it was just from sharing off and riffing off personal experiences, community, understanding that growing up in America and Ireland and coming from Qatar and not having, you know, you're always kind of different. But the one thing that I knew what sports offered was, when you're part of a team, you're part of that community, and it doesn't matter what you look like or what, you know, what you sound like, or how, as long as you are adding value and it's a team, you know, inclusion, diversity, all of these things kind of started to surface now. But for me, as during that time, I knew if I was good at football, I wouldn't be picked last, you know, and I got good at it. And football is soccer, as you call it, which is just, you gotta sort that out, buddy.
All right. If I don't say it, you know, everyone's like, you played NFL football?
This is one thing that will never die. From you know what I mean? It's and I love it. Every time I go, oh, soccer, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll have this conversation for 300 years from now.
It's true. It's true.
But that's the thing. You go from a sense of community, a sense of belonging, says teamwork, time management, understanding that, you know, you're part of a group that has a common goal. But then you go from that kind of discipline in that sport to the only thing that you can be is the water. Like there's no one else. It's just you and the pool, and then you're no longer part of this community. It's like a fight between you and yourself. The only person who can tell you that you're not good enough or you're not putting a shift in is the time on the board at the end. So what was it like becoming this, you know, what was there any root change for you when it comes from becoming your own guy and defeating yourself and trying to defeat yourself constantly?
Yeah, I think that like that's a lot of like great pieces, I think, to that, in the aspect of like whenever I was swimming, right, you're still on a swim team, but you're racing individually. So, I mean, we still train together. It's just like, there's also relays. So there are team opportunities, but at the same time, it's still just yourself. And I think that that's something that I learned as well, as like, can also be a positive in the aspect of what I put in is what I get out, right? It's no longer like relying on someone else's performance to impact my success. And so I knew that every day I showed up to the pool, it's the work I'm putting in that's I'm going to be able to cash in later to, you know, hopefully stand on the podium. So I think that it's just been one of those opportunities that, you know, swimming is it's grueling, and it's a sport that's very unforgiving. And I think that being a sprinter, where I race very short races, a lot can go wrong in 20 seconds. And so that was another thing that, you know, especially like you playing golf, you'll definitely get this too. It's like precision is everything. And in swimming, a lot of people don't realize when we're fighting for, you know, 1/10 of a second here, 100th of a second here. I mean, it can be the difference of moving your head that much, you know? So it's like, there's a lot of details that go into swimming that go a long ways, because it's a lot of repetitive movement. And so when you're repeating an inefficient way to swim, you know, it became, that's the difference of that half a second you're fighting for. So So I think that I kind of became a nerd of the sport, if you will. I was watching a lot of videos of who's the best in the world and how do I become that, but also training with people that were faster than me. I trained on a fully sighted team. I was most of the time the only person in the pool that had a visual impairment. So, you know, I'm relying on people that have fully sight, or, you know, that are fully sighted to help me train or race or whatever that may be. But when you go to the Paralympics, I'm only racing against people that are visually impaired. So when we touch the wall, none of us can turn around and look up at the scoreboard and see who won, right? So that's another thing that like goes into Paralympics too, that you're like, I think, did you win? Like there's this like moment of like, you're looking at each other and you're like, I'm exhausted. So I think I put out what I needed to. So, you know, Paralympics just really, it opened my mind of really what you can do with a disability, but also what you can do with a disability by yourself, as well as a team. In Paralympics, there's a lot of team sports. So it's just something that really helped me understand that like having a disability doesn't mean it's over. And I was able to take a sport to the top of the world.
And for just the fact that I'm so appreciative of how kind of, you know, open you are and honest and joking about it and things like that. But it must have been, you know, at 17, you're already in sports, you're working with, you know, you have your team, you have a support group behind you, whether it's family, friends, coaches. What was that moment like? You know, where was it for you that you were, or what was the main thing that kind of allowed you to continue?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about whenever I started to lose my vision, I would say that swimming is, it was very cathartic for me. I didn't have to talk to anybody about it. You know, the good thing about swimming is that you put your face in the water and you don't have to say anything. So when I was losing my vision, it was a lot of reflective moments of me in the pool of like, okay, should I do this anymore? Like, am I going to hurt myself? Like, is this even worth it? Like, I had a lot of conversations like that with myself. And it was something that was also a constant through my whole story, of losing my vision, because I talk to people all the time that start to lose their vision in their life, and mentoring them and having that conversation of, you know, there's people that do a lot of great things that are completely blind. It might not be sports. You know, there's a lot of great computer programmers that can't see at all and can write and type and read stuff faster than people with eyes. So I think that swimming at 17 years old was a really great thing, and the aspect of it kept me sane. But also, as swimming was a constant, everything outside of the pool was changing. So I kind of leaned on swimming because it was something that I knew. And also the fact that, you know, I lived in a part of North Carolina where you have to drive everywhere. And the pinnacle moment of just acceptance for me, was actually giving up my driver's license, because it wasn't until that moment that a lot of like significant things had changed, because I was now going from a 17-year-old kid where you look forward to driving like your whole life, right? That's your independence. My mom doesn't have to drive me anymore. I can hop in my car and go to the movies, whatever. But to be 17 years old and say, actually, I don't want to drive because I don't want to hurt someone else or hurt myself, you know, knowing I had that choice and turning in my driver's license was definitely that moment of like, okay, this disability is real. And it became like this new identity that I had to accept, because there wasn't a cure. The disease I have doesn't have any treatment. It's painless vision loss. So everything just started to kind of disappear in front of me. And so that whole journey, I would say it was great that swimming was in my life, because that was the only reason I feel like I was able to stay out of that rabbit hole of like trying to go down that depression side of it, because I got to keep doing something that I loved.
And in the pool, that's kind of your escape, or was that like, was it?
Yeah,
you know,
I would say that. Yeah, definitely. It was an escape, but also a moment of like, okay, I don't have to talk to anyone, because outside of the pool, everyone's asking me questions. How's your vision? How are you doing? Are you okay? But inside the pool, those questions weren't coming out, and I was able to kind of get away from that environment and enjoy still being great at something. I think was also just an opportunity that sports offers me, as well as, you know, having that outlet or escape. It's exactly what it was.
And have things changed to the better? Are there things that, you know, you say this way, yeah, you want to drive and, you know, you're that's what you're looking forward to and things like that. But have things changed in your life that have impacted you in a positive sense, or is outside of the sports and athletics?
I think maturity wise, for sure. I think that I grew up really fast. I tell people all the time, like, when I lost my vision, like, it tested my community. I realized who my real friends were. I realized, like, you know, how to treat people, because now I needed to rely on others to help me be successful and independent. But also accepting that, you know, I might have to take a little bit longer to do something. Like, that was another thing, like being a competitive human being, right? Like, sometimes it's frustrating that I can't read something, or if I go into a restaurant, like, I can't see the menu, like, behind the counter or whatever it may be, right? Like, those things happen to me still. So I think that accepting that this new identity was something that I would be, I just have to, like, kind of encapsulate and say, like, all right, what are we going to do with the cards that are in my hand? But you just kind of find a different way to do something. And I live in a city where I don't need to drive, because I can hop on public transportation, on the train, or I can take a bus to the grocery store. So you just kind of find solutions to the things that were originally like a hindrance or something that was negative. And it's just a different way. Like, it's a different angle to go outside the box to get the results that I wanted. So I think it's just been a trial and error period of finding the things that work for me. And accessible technology has really helped fill the void of vision loss. I use a lot of accessible technology, from my iPhone to my computer, as well as just, you know, asking someone and being an advocate for myself of, like, hey, I can't see that. Like, can you tell me what's on the menu? Like, do I want to say that? Not really. But otherwise, I just stand there and people look at you and they're like, you all right? And I'm like, I just really love this restaurant. I love to watch the menu. You know, it's like, those are the things that kind of go through your head, right? So
just don't mind me. I'm having an existential crisis.
I love this dessert. There's only 3 options, but I can't choose. You know, it's like, those are the things that going through life, you just kind of figure out, like, you know what, sometimes you got to put your pride aside and just say, like, hey, I'm looking for ice cream. What do you got up there? You know, like, that's kind of where it goes.
But I'm sure you get, you know, you don't have to queue up anymore. And, you know,
yeah, that's true.
You have to jump the queue now if you ever need government services. If you ever go to,
but
you know,
the problem is that everyone looks at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? You're walking fine. Like, why are you in that line? And I'm like, I'll just go back to the normal line, because I don't want to have to explain to all 75 of you people while I'm over here and you're over there. So it just depends. But I mean, yeah, if I go to an amusement park, you better believe I'm going to the front of the line.
Oh, well, I'm not going to say anything. You know what I mean? Can't say anything about that. It's all good, man. It's all good. I just buy that really expensive pass that still makes you have to queue up for like 20 minutes. It's like, I thought VIP. Why am I waiting? And there's like, oh no, there's bigger VIPs and you can't buy those.
Yeah, those are like, you know, you have to inherit those tickets. You can't actually purchase them. You're like, aren't we at Disney World? Like, what is happening here?
Right. And then where does it go from school, high school, and national championships to then go to Paralympic Games? And just talk me through that. Like, what changes in your life? Obviously, to, like, just give me kind of an example of what a day in your life is like when you're training for the Olympics. Like,
yeah. So the way I actually discovered the Paralympics, mind you, this was 2007. So the internet was not what it is today. And so I was going to a blind rehab school where I was trying to get my hands on technologies and things that would, you know, learning how to read Braille and really trying to figure out what I was going to be able to do with the vision I had left, or if I did go completely blind, I needed to know what are my options, right? If I can see a little bit, If I go to the grocery store, how can I tell what the aisles are, or how can I see far away or see up close? So in 2007, I was on my flip phone, my cell phone that was, T9 texting. And so at that, exactly. So I,
for most of the Instagram live followers now,
yeah,
they were flip phones.
It was different, right? And so I was using a magnifying glass at the time, right? So in my pocket, I had my flip phone that was already probably like this thick and about that wide. And on my other pocket, I had a very strong magnifying glass. So I would take that magnifying glass and read the text message and then click every single number just to say hello, like the good old days. And that was, how I texted at the time. And seeing far away in the grocery store, I had a monocular. So like one piece of a binocular, and I would look far away to like read the signs in the grocery store. So I'm showing up to the grocery store like Dora the Explorer with like a belt of like tools. Meanwhile, like
why Dora? Why did you go for Dora? Why
Explorer? It just came to my mind. It just had to happen. So I was handed these tools that were really helping, fill the void of the vision loss. And so long story short, I was there and word got around that I was a swimmer, and they had asked me like, do you know what the Paralympics are? And I was like, I have no idea what the Paralympics are. They're like, it's the same thing as the Olympics. It's 2 weeks later. And, it's for people with physical disabilities. And I was like, okay, how do I get involved? And so I started reaching out to the United States Olympic Committee, and they were like, hey, we've got a swim meet coming up, like come see what happens and come race at the meet and we'll see what happens. And when I dove in my first Paralympic swim meet, I was the fastest blind swimmer the United States had in like 27 years. And I was literally breaking American record after American record every single time I swum. So it was something that I had no idea what that even meant. I was like, wow, a record, what does that mean? Is that a paycheck? Is that a job? What do we do now? And they were like, well, Paralympic Games are in 2008. And so you should come to Paralympic trials. And so I swam trials and I was named to the team. So it really snowballed pretty quickly. But at the same time, it was one of those pieces of my life that I'm so glad that it did, because, I've done more without vision than I would have ever dreamed of doing sighted. And all that was possible through sports and the Paralympics.
So you're holding American and Pan American records.
Mm-hmm.
You try out for the 2008 Olympics.
Yep.
And you get on the team, and then 4 years later, you win 3 medals.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a moment after that Olympics that you were like, okay, this is it for me, and I'm not just going to come back here and break records. I'm going to win everything. Was that the mindset that kind of kept you going? What was the first Paralympic Games experience for you like, and what drove you to keep going to 2012?
Losing.
Yeah,
that's the answer. Losing. I think that so Beijing played out where my best finish in Beijing was 4th, and I got 4th place by like 2/100ths of a second.
Ooh.
And so that's
no
like
more. You don't need to say anymore, buddy. You don't need to say anymore, buddy.
Yeah,
and you have to wait another 4 years.
Yes, exactly. So it's the worst place to come in. 4th is never good, and it was something that I came back from Beijing, and I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Like, to be top 4 in the world in an event is like amazing, right? Like, that's, to be top anything in the world is great. So that's where I was like, okay, I walked away from that games. I was 19 years old. And I look at Beijing as an option in my career of like, I learned how to dance the dance, because you're swimming in an arena of, 30,000 people. I went from little swim meets in North Carolina where I was the slowest kid in the pool to basically swimming in the World Cup, right? Like, that's what it was like. Yeah. And I mean, at 19 years old, you're a young man. So it's like, to me, I was like, I don't know what this is like. Like, I'm nervous. I did great. I did what I could do. So I came back from that games, and a lot of my coaches started to push me with some tough love of, what color is your 4th place medal? And I was like,
oh, Oh yeah.
All right. Okay.
You know,
Okay. All right. Like, like I get in that mindset of like, you went there. So, I mean, it kind of just turned into this new thing of like, all right, I know what it's like not to win a medal. And so exactly 1 year later is World Championships. So in between the Olympics, you have World Championships and the Pan American Games. And so World Championships is the exact same people that you see at the Olympics. So I dove in at Worlds and I broke a world record in the 100 butterfly and won the gold medal like exactly a year after Beijing. And I was like, that's what I'm trying to do. And then I just came back and was like, all right, nothing but the podium for the rest of my career. And that was something that I tried to hold myself accountable to. And I was able to do that in London. So yeah, I think I always tell people it's losing. That's literally what drove the horse, because I know what it's like to put your hand on the wall and not get on the podium, and having to watch the podium ceremony from TV in the back room is never where I wanted to be.
Yeah. And I think it's the coaching staff. Is it the coaching staff and the team that you have that knows how to get you motivated? Because there is, a part of any sport is learning how to lose. And sometimes if the loss is really heavy, like, on the 10th of a second, that's, if you lose by a country mile, I can accept that. But if you lose when you're like, it's the last second or it's a 10th of a second, that messes with you for so, you know what I mean? It really tests you. And is the way to motivate you to challenge you and to make you more spiteful towards yourself, to beat yourself? Or is it to kind of recognize the loss, recognize your own ability, be humble, and just keep going forward? Which kind of competitive mindset are you?
I'm definitely that. I would like to say I'm a blend of that, because I don't respond very well to constant negativity. So like, I'm not the person that's like the athlete that needs to be like brought down, or they're like, oh, you're not that great. Like, no, I like to be told that. So it's like, I'm not the person. But at the same time, like, I knew that Beijing just wasn't my time, right? Like I walked away from that game saying like, that was just getting my feet wet, no pun intended. But like, it was like, try and dance the dance, right? Like you really got to understand the process. And at 19 years old, I mean, I'd only been swimming competitively for 5 years. So I went from swim meets where it's just the parents and the kids, up in the stands, to being at a world competition. And that's something that I think also made me realize that if you really work hard at this, you can be that person on the podium. And that's when I was like, all right, this is real stuff, right? Because outside of the United States, Paralympics is one of the largest sporting events in the world, right? Like, it's not just like that's just a swim meet down the street. Like, it's a big deal. And so that's when I was like, outside of the United States, I realized like, wow, this is a big deal. Like, people knew who I was and I didn't know who they were. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. To get off the podium and people are like leaning over, like, throw us your flower. Like, I mean, it was a different world. Like, I was like, I feel like this is a movie. And so I knew that if I like worked hard and put the time in, it wasn't going to be handed to me. And that was what I needed to realize, is like, okay, this is no longer swimming swim meets, at the local pool. This is a world event, and I need to be a world-class athlete. So I need to train like one. So yeah, the coaching staff, the teammates I train with, right? Like, I can't do it without them. And we talk about on the Paralympics and really just the Olympic side of house, that when you're standing on the podium with a medal around your neck, it's the community that got you there. And we call it like the team behind the team. And that's really the truth of it, because, it's all those coaches that stayed after practice with me. It's all the coaching advice, the teamwork, and all of that combined into one for that one race, for that piece of metal. And that's who's standing behind me on the podium. I'm not up there alone. And that was something that I realized that is real, and it's about community and the relationships you build. And
the World Championships, you're there. What is it like training? Like, what's your day like? Did you wake up?
Yeah.
Are you training 16 hours a day? Is there a specific diet? What is your kind of, and for how long do you do it? Is there like a camp? Is it just You know, is it 3 months, 4 months, 6 months before? You know, what is it like? What's the training regimen like?
So in swimming, there's like a rule of thumb that every day you're out of the water, it takes 2 days to get back to where you were when you got out. So if I take a day off, it takes me 2 days to get back to where I was when I took that day off. So I swam 7 days a week, and it was 3 workouts. So you do a 2-hour session in the morning. I would do a 2-hour session of weights right after that, eat lunch, massage, recovery, and then another 2-hour session in the afternoon. So it's 6 hours with recovery and all of that. It's a full-time job. It's 8 hours a day, and all for an event that lasts less than 20 seconds.
Wow.
So
wow.
I've done like, I'm not going to remember the numbers, but back when I was training, it was like thousands and thousands of hours for less than 10 minutes of racing. And that's over the course of like 10 days. So, you know, you only swim your event, like the 50 freestyle is quick, you know, 20 plus seconds, and, you know, that's it. So that's twice. So that's less than a minute, you know, and you win a medal out of less than a minute of racing. So, it's a lot of work. I always tell people it's like with food and diet. I mean, I was just eating anything I could get my hands on because I was training so much. I just always needed to consume food. So, yeah, I think that, you know, it's a whole project of training is half of the equation. The mental aspect is another piece. The diet is another piece. The mental psychology of it is a whole nother piece. So it becomes your full-time job.
And from where you are now, and, you know, if any young aspiring athletes, I mean, for this, the work is there, whether you have your vision is impaired or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to put in the shift always. Is
Yeah.
there anything else, you know, from your journey that you want to share, that, you know, if there's any aspiring athletes, any kind of messages for them?
Yeah. The best advice I was ever given as an athlete is that you can only worry about the things that you can control. And I think that that's something that, to be able to compartmentalize those things is tough, right? So just a journey would be, you know, you show up to the pool, it's the prelims for, you know, whatever race it may be. The pool is cold. The air around the pool is cold. So you're cold. Then it's like, okay, I'm tired and I didn't eat exactly what I wanted to last night. So I can't control the pool temperature. I can't control the air temperature. I can control how much I eat, and I can control how much I sleep. So that's 50-50 of like, I can only worry about the other two things that I have impact over, but everyone's swimming in the same pool. So everyone's thinking it's cold. Everyone's, you know, those things were what I really tried to focus my energy on, because I think that you kind of get to a point where you're trying to find new ways to get better. And so you can start to gravitate towards things that you can't control. And that's where I've really tried to spin my mind and my mental capacity around the stuff that I have impact over, and making sure that I show up to every race, every practice as best I can, and only worrying about the things that I can control, is what made me successful, because I wasn't able to tell how much my competitors slept or what they were eating. So why worry about that, right? Like I can't control what suit they're racing in or what they're doing. So I need to stay in my own lane, and I need to make sure that I really just worry about the stuff that I can do, and make sure I leave it all in the pool.
I think that's great life advice as well. It's not just, you know, I mean, worrying about things that you can control. Yeah, I mean, makes so simple. It's said so simply, like you said, like, you know, oh, just worry about the things that you control and things that you can't control. You know, that is a really good piece of advice. I mean, I wrote it down. Like,
but it's also your attitude, right? Like you can control your attitude. If I show up to practice and I'm like, I don't want to be here, then don't leave. I've had coaches literally, if that comes to my mouth, they'll be like, all right, we'll see you tomorrow. And I'm like, what? Seriously, I'll see you tomorrow. And I'm like, because that becomes a cancer amongst the team I'm training with, right? If I have that attitude of walking in the pool of like, I don't want to be here, I'm tired. Well, I'm going to say that out loud. And then the person next to me who's training is going to be like, oh, I'm kind of tired too. And I don't really want to be here. And then it starts to become this bigger problem. So It's like, attitude is a huge thing that you can control, and the stuff that you say to people and the relationships you build, all of those things are in your hand. So I think that those are the things you got to kind of focus your energy on and make sure you keep it healthy.
And in your experience, when the term inclusion and diversity in sport is I hear it a lot over the last 5-10 years or so. Are you where do you stand with that kind of terminology? Are you like inclusion in sport and things like that, and whether it's for people with disability, or it's just do you feel like that there is still a stigma around Paralympians or athletes without any disabilities? Is it what do you feel like there's a lot more that can be done, or and where are you now within that kind of what's your role? You've lived it, you've been through it, this is your life. What do you feel like is being done or not being done?
I think that there is definitely gaps, but it's a movement, and it's having conversations like this with you and having people that are listening to this that make that change. And I believe that I say this to people all the time. I acquired my disability. I'm a person with a disability. And even in that sentence, the word person comes first. I want to be treated equal. I want to be looked at and not have someone say like, oh, he's blind, like poor guy. And I'm like, don't pity me. Like, I don't pity myself, so it's like, I want equality. I want to be treated the same way. And same thing around all other athletes that I know that are Paralympians, right? Like, we want the same TV coverage. We want the same things that the Olympians have, because we do the same type of training on top of the fact that we have to check our disability at the door, right? Like, all of us still have to get in and practice our sport, put the shift in. But at the same time, if you don't get better. And oh yeah, don't forget you have a disability too. So that's another added obstacle. It might not be vision. It might be you're missing both your legs. Like, there's tons of disabilities that participate at the Paralympics, and everyone has their own journey. And so I would just say that the biggest thing is that people with disabilities are people. Treat them like that.
Yeah. I mean, there is like a social stigma, and we still, I mean, as a Qatari living in Qatar, and I was fortunate enough to kind of see the world and grow up around the world, and there's a lot of common ground when it comes to this, whether, I think it's just a people thing where sometimes, there's, poor guy, he's on a wheelchair. But then there's also people who are so afraid of society that they would never own up to the fact that, their child has a disability, or their friend or their cousin or their brother or their neighbor. They disassociate themselves so far from it. And I feel like that's, such an archaic way of thinking, like, and it's, as you say, people with disability, people comes first, but it's almost like, they'll bring shame to our family, or they'll bring shame to our tribe, if you want to call it that. And we have to hide the fact that we have some kind of, or the people that live in denial, the fact that, this is impossible. My son can never be autistic. This is not, this is not possible. Or, it's kind of, hiding away and having that social construct where people are, I feel like there's just needs to be an evolution, and that happens, as you said, with conversations. But at the same time, there needs to be a lot, a good slap in the face of reality is good. It should be normalized, where if you go to a public event and it's not accessible, someone has to talk about that, and it should be normalized. And people need to know that, oh, this needs to be safe, accessible. The same kind of experience should be catered to everyone who, bought the ticket.
Yeah.
And we're hosting, Qatar is hosting the World Cup 2022, and one of the missions is that it becomes one of the most accessible World Cups. And conversations like this, I think, only allow us to really feel some kind of an impact, or have some kind of an impact on what, whoever's watching this might have not even heard of, what we're talking about. And that might give them that spark or ignite some kind of curiosity into this. I remember the first time I was introduced to the Paralympic Games, I think it was in 2000 in Ireland, and that's when I was like, what, there's Paralympic Games, what's that? It's like, it's, conversations, but you must have had a stigma around you being, outside of you being an athlete back at home, or going on a vacation, or hanging out with friends, or whatever it was. Were there moments in your life where it got a bit too much and you felt like there's just way too much ignorance around me and you can't, or is that still happening?
It does happen, actually. And it's interesting you say that, because it happened recently where I flew last weekend, and in the flight log, it says that I'm in seat 4A and I'm blind, but I walked on the plane without anyone helping me. And so flight attendants walk up to me and they're like, excuse me, are you Mr. Dupree? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it says that you're blind. I'm like, yeah, I'm 80% blind. And then as soon as I said that, that person then talked louder to me. And I was like, I'm blind, not deaf. Like, I can hear you, right? Like, but at the same time, right? Okay, fine. And I was like, it's always an opportunity to educate, right? Like, I get it. Like, maybe that is in that person's mind an opportunity where they're like, oh, well, I need to explain this more thoroughly, or, they're trying to accommodate me to what they know as an accommodation. And that's the difference of having a disability is, you can't expect people to understand what you need, right? Because you don't take a class on how to help the disabled, right? None of us take that class in life. And so it's through experiences of, wow, I interacted with someone today at work that was blind, this flight attendant going home saying this, and I didn't realize that, I was talking louder to him, or, it's like having those moments of education of saying like, hey, listen, it can happen. And, I don't know if that does happen to that person again, hopefully they're like, I don't need to talk louder. I should, just say like, hey, cool, the exit's 4 seats in front of you or 6 rows behind you. And so it's just making sure that you treat people like people, right? Like, you didn't talk louder to other people in the plane. Like, so just talk to me like I'm a person. But I also think that I was that person at one point in my life, right? At 16 years old, I had no idea I was going to acquire a disability. And so I had that same mindset of like, oh, I see someone in a wheelchair, like, man, I feel bad for them. But now that I'm at a point where there's a second part to that sentence of, oh, that sucks, they're in a wheelchair, but I wonder what happened. Like, what are they doing? Like, there's more to it, because I see them as a person, and that they're out doing things. They're doing a lot of great things with their life. And I think that it just takes that moment of like, and like, you have to think, and like, he's blind and he does this, or he has a disability and he can go out and do XYZ or accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. But it takes that moment of like thinking to yourself, we're people, and treat us like that. It shouldn't be, oh, that person has a disability and I feel bad for them. It's that, hey, you're a person and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, right? Like, just let you do your stuff. And I think that people do have a glimpse into that sometimes in their lives, right? Like, if you break your ankle or you break your arm, your life gets tested, right? Even if it's for a couple of months, right? You don't realize what it's like to have a disability until you are hit with it, or until someone has maybe a temporary impairment. It's like, And they always say that, oh my gosh, I can't imagine about that until I saw that person go through it, or until I was on crutches for 5 weeks and I didn't realize how hard it is to get around the world with that impairment. So I think it's just like, we all can be touched by it at some point, but it's how you handle it and how you want to overcome it. It's up to you. It's your choice.
And do you think which one is more of a powerful message? Is it sport or everyday life as as someone who's an employee or a part of a community? Or I think obviously sport has a much larger impact, like events like the Olympics. But which one would drive more awareness? Like, what do you think? I mean, you're on both sides, and it's very easy, for me to ask this question to you. Otherwise, if it was someone else who didn't have that same experience, it would be very difficult. But you've gone through, elite athlete, Paralympic Games, consistent training regimes, and now you work in the Chi-town, right? Is it Chicago? You work in Chicago now?
Yep.
One of my favorite cities in America. Chicago is phenomenal. I envy you a little bit.
You can come over anytime you want.
I will. And when you come to Doha, you're going to, we're definitely going to.
You're going to find tickets for the World Cup. I know it. You got my Instagram. You can find me. I'm ready.
But which one do you feel has more impact?
I think that sports may have the opportunity to put it in the spotlight, but at the end of that, if you don't walk away from watching Paralympics or any type of disabled sporting event and realize that when you leave that stadium or that event, or, whether you're a participant or a spectator, that you don't leave with that thought of like, that was inspiring, but that's their day-to-day. That's what it means the most, is that, like, I keep going back to that point of their people, but it is, right? Like that person that just swam, that's in a wheelchair, they get back in their wheelchair and go back to the village and they eat dinner and they shower and they do everything that you do, right? Like we aren't a secret society. Yeah. And that's what I try and tell people, is that, it's an amalgam of all of it. It's all of the things together that make this movement happen. And sports is just like the marketing arm, or that spotlight moment where people are actually exposed to the fact that, wow, there's people with disabilities that are really good at sports too, and they're all from all around the world. And that's what I think the power of sports can be, is that you can put aside your differences, you can put away a disability and come together around one common event. And also in Paralympics, it's a common event where these people with disabilities shine with equality. That really makes you say, like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, it's not cool that they're doing something and they're not sitting in their room. It's cool that they're winning medals. They just happen to have a disability. Yeah. And that's where I'm like, that's what I think the power of sports can be.
I mean, I remember I was hosting an event for, this was years ago, but I think it was the South African basketball team, Paralympic team. And I was the host. So they're like, okay, now you get to come and try it. And they sat me in a chair in the center of the court. And I was supposed to throw a ball. Like, and everything I've known about throwing a ball
was
exactly on my feet. Like,
yeah.
And I honestly, I just couldn't do it. And it was, for me, for, a glimpse of a second, I felt embarrassed. And I was like, oh my God, I just embarrassed myself in front of everyone here who's watching. And then I look around and I'm like, why am I embarrassed? These people are amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone here who's playing this game, and the fact that they make it look so easy, and it was the interactions and everything. It was just, I felt for that moment, I was like, yeah, I'm part of this team now. And I'm, and we finished the event and everything, and we get to hang out and talk. And I was just like, it felt like a dream after you leave, and you're just like, I'm very lucky to have that experience. Not everyone gets to have those kind of experiences, but the fact that I went away from that and I started talking to people all about it, and they're like, oh, okay. And I felt like that wasn't justified. It wasn't enough. So I started getting involved in all of, whatever it was, whether it's awareness campaigns or just being part of a community or just retweeting something or posting something about it. And just the fact that accessibility being one, right? The fact that you have to, in 2021 or 2020 or whatever, anything after 2010 with all the burst of technology that we're in, and it's like accessibility not being, in any kind of social construct or social engagement, if that's not part of the main conversation, then I feel like whoever's organizing or planning, or that for me is a big problem. It's not just about crowd and things like that, but if you have a segment of the population that wants to come enjoy the event or the proceedings or whatever it is that you're doing, accessibility doesn't, it's got to be for me, it's one of the, like you've got your security, health and safety, accessibility, put it in there. Like it's not number 13, what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. But also it can't be an afterthought, right? Like it needs to be something that's part of that roadmap and not just like, all right, turn on the lights. Oh no, we have no wheelchair ramps in this whole stadium. Get the plywood out, like it can't be an afterthought. It has to be like part of the planning, part of that process. And I think it's also not just thinking through it of like, oh, well, we think this is what they would need. Hire people that have disabilities and ask them, like, what do you need? If you're in a wheelchair, what do you need in a stadium? What's the best thing? And they're going to tell you, because the other side of the coin is you don't ask them. And then they show up and they're like, well, all of these little lips that I can't get over, like when I ride my wheelchair over, now it's even harder. It's like, those are the things, like people with disabilities are more than welcome to give you their feedback, but you can't be afraid to ask them, right? Like we do that with everything around like any type of consumer research. People with disabilities are just another population that we have to weigh in on. It's not it's not rocket science. It's literally just like, hey, say that to someone. Hey, you're in a wheelchair. Would this bother you? Yeah, that probably bother me. All right, so we're not going to do that ramp. Let's try a different ramp. You know what I mean? It's like, that's it. It's not that far-fetched. So I just think that's the biggest thing, is having people with disabilities on committees, having those conversations and being a part of the process is what makes this movement the most powerful and really create change.
All right, we have a question on Facebook. Have you ever faced any stigmatization as a result of your challenges? And if yes, how do you and they go about it?
Great question. I think that, so I walk around very high functioning. I don't use a cane when I walk around in public. So a lot of people don't even think that I'm blind. And it isn't until you are like really paying attention to the details of like, my phone is really big text. I'm zooming in on it. Like I can't see far away that I have to ask for that, assistance. But it happens to me daily. I have people that, will look at me on my phone in public and feel the need to say like, you're really close to your phone. You should get some glasses. And I'm like, got those too. Still can't see. Like, that's great. But, it's that moment of when someone says that, like taking a second and a deep breath and saying like, oh yeah, sorry, like I'm actually 80% blind. And they're like, oh, and it changes their perspective, right? So that exchange has just gone from, I think I'm being funny, to actually I'm being a jerk and I need to think about what I say to people, and that's something that I think as a person with a disability, you have to advocate for that, but also like I need to educate, right? Like it's my job to educate that person that doesn't understand that you probably shouldn't say that to anybody, or, going into a store and the credit card machine, like I have to get this close to it, right? Like I have to look at it really close. And I've had multiple people say like, what are you, blind? Why are you so close to that? And I stand up and like, matter of fact, I am. Here's my ID, and it's like, they don't realize that that's not okay to say, but also it's educating them. It's being that person that says like, hey, I'm not mad at you. Like you're being harmless with your comment, but I'm going to educate you that you probably shouldn't say that. And there are people that might not look exactly what your stereotypical blind person looks like. And you also don't know what someone's got going on. So saying stuff like that from the hip might not be the best option. So I don't know. Those are two examples of like day-to-day things that happen to me that, yeah, people stare at me, people say stuff, and I'm just like, whatever. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm like, I'm glad I wore my favorite shirt today because everyone's going to stare. It's like, it is what it is.
And there's like a human-to-human interaction thing there, whether it's, I don't know, I think we're just the way you're programmed, the way society is, and because it's so removed from the conversation, or not always part of the conversation when two able people are, always, interacting. I think there's just, it just takes time and more and effort and just recognizing inward first. For me, it's like, okay, maybe, I mean, I say this with like trying to be a comedian and then doing the things that you do and writing jokes, but at the same time, your interactions with, I live in a society where these things still don't get the attention they deserve. Yes, there are a lot of people doing work. There's a lot of NGOs and communities and government-backed centers, and there's a lot of that happening, and they exist, but I feel like it's, they're not communicating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is here and it exists, but in the wider society, if you don't need to know it, it's not for you. It's not part of your conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas it should be, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more done, especially with the tools we have today, digital marketing or information, access to information, digital communication, different community events, there's always room to kind of make sure the message gets there, like any other message that's backed for profit or commercial gain. Like, let's
exactly
get a spot in there, kind of thing.
I think that the only thing I want to add to that, because I think this is like a good example, because it happened to me recently. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine that's a wheelchair basketball player, actually, and she is always wheelchair bound. And she was telling me, she was like, little things like when she's in public, people, a little kid will point at her and stare at her. And she's like, parents will see that interaction and they automatically look down and they say, shh, no, don't say that. Don't say that. Yeah. And she was like, actually, I want them to say that. You need to have the conversation. You need to talk to your kids and say like, hey, yeah, she is in a wheelchair. Why don't you just go ask her a question or go say hi to her? And that's what she said. She was like, that is the problem, is that we are always like hush hush about it. And it's like, I mean, that's in the United States. And that's where it's like, okay, that's a great moment where like, also you have to understand that not all people that have disabilities are as open as me and this other person is, where like, we're absolutely, I'll talk to anybody about it, whatever. But and that's a great example of like, we've all either seen that in a movie or seen that interaction in public. And I think that's it, right? Like what you just said is like, yeah, there's people doing work and all of that, but until that switch happens of these are people, they do great things, look at what they've accomplished. That's no different than saying something to an able-bodied person, right? Like we look at other athletes of like how many medals they've won, all of that. And then they look at Paralympians and they're like, wow, you've won a lot of medals too. And then they're like, and they're in a wheelchair. And it's like, yeah, so what? It's like, it can't be that thought process of like,
Yeah.
shh, don't say anything to her. Like, she's in a wheelchair. Like, you should feel bad for her. But like, we're teaching that at such a young age. Then I'm like, no different than staring at somebody with a crazy pair of shoes on. You're going to be like, stare at the crazy shoes. And that person is they wore those shoes for a reason, whatever. But it's like, are you going to tell your kid not to talk about the shoes? No. You're going to be like, man, those are some really cool shoes. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's just a different topic. It's the same exchange. It's just literally a different themed topic. But why are we okay to have that conversation, but not okay to have the conversation of say, hey, yeah, go talk to her. Why don't you go say something? Because that automatically makes that kid think, wow, they're just as normal as me. They're just in a wheelchair.
Yeah, I don't think we have time to go into the mindset of social engineering.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'll have that last. I completely, I'm with you, man. I don't know. We all have our own kind of experiences, and in my life, shared some of it with you today.
Yeah.
It is, and as a parent now, I look at these things, and it's very different from when I was younger. It's a very, very different world that we live in now, and some of it, alarms go off in your head because, oh, that's my kid, and some of it, it's like,
for sure.
Four. But what's next for you? I mean, tell us. For Paralympic Day, or not are you active? Are you constantly going to be an advocate for for this kind of interactions, is awareness, raising awareness, whether it's through sport or not?
Yeah.
And
so sorry, go ahead.
Through your work as well.
Yeah. What's next for me? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I think that I am still active. I work with a group on the Fitter, Faster Swim Tour, where we travel all over the United States and do swim clinics for kids. So I'm very involved still in the swimming community. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I have the awesome opportunity to swim for some of the best coaches in the world. So some of the kids that we coach won't have that opportunity. So that's a big thing that I really enjoy doing. So I do that on the weekend. And then during the week, I actually work for BP, the gas company. And I am in a role around the workplace environment for people with disabilities. So making sure that everyone comes to our work offices and has that equality, having someone in the room that's not afraid to talk about it, because I live it, right? So the accessibility of our offices and all of that, as well as other employee engagement. So I'm still in the DE&I space, and hoping to make a difference at BP. But yeah, it's definitely my passion. It's something that I will always be a part of. And what else is next is I got to start looking at flights for the World Cup, because you just said you got me hooked up. So coming on over.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And I really want to know more about your training for swimming and things like that, because that's definitely something. If we can, I'll invite you to Doha and we can figure out.
Let's do a clinic.
There. So, yeah, for sure. Not to promo myself, but yeah, one of my first business was a sports academy for kids, and awesome. The more we expand, these are always opportunities. I'm just a firm believer in that. Sports is something, team sports specifically, are the best thing when it comes to breaking boundaries and all kinds of all kinds of stigma or challenges around inclusion and diversity and things like that, just from personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
It was, I'm a brown kid growing up in a sea of white. Like a sore thumb, and you're always picked last. And it is, I'd love to keep talking, and for sure, whenever you're in Doha, I extend the invitation to all of my guests on the show. And if I'm ever in Chicago, I will definitely, look you up.
Yeah, come on over. I'll show you the ropes.
Maybe I'll show you my side of Chicago.
Perfect. That's perfect. Let's do it. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, man. It's been an
Yeah.
absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll do this again, and we'll be in touch on the Instagram.
Yes, you will.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for watching, and don't forget, we'll be back with episode 10 of Swalif in July. Until then, it's been me, Hamad Al Amari, with the awesome and amazing Tucker Dupree. See ya. Peace out.